3 cycles ago, I watched a human tear apart 47 Corvan shock troopers with nothing but a broken chair leg. Today that same human sat in advanced xenobiology, asking if he could borrow a pen. My name is Zilt Ka, and I still wake up screaming. But let me back up, because you need to understand how spectacularly wrong we all were about Marcus Webb. The Galactic Academy for Interspecies Excellence prided itself on bringing together the most promising minds from across 17 different worlds. We had the crystalline scholars of Mentera, the 6-armed tactical geniuses of Blex 9, even a few of those insufferably smug Altarian philosophers who spoke only in riddles. Then the humans applied for membership. The Corvan Council, those arrogant purple-scaled bastards who ran everything, laughed until their throat sacs nearly burst. Humans, those soft pink creatures from that backwater world called Earth, the species that still fought with projectile weapons and couldn't even manage faster than light travel without borrowing our technology. Let them come, wheezed senior council member Vraktul, wiping tears from his compound eyes. It will be amusing to watch them fail. So Marcus Webb became the first human student at the academy, and from the moment he walked through those doors, everything went sideways. The first red flag should have been the medical forms. Dr. Hesvet, our Altarian physician, spent 3 hours staring at Marcus's biological data with the kind of expression you'd wear if someone told you that water was actually poisonous. "This cannot be correct," she muttered, her silver fingers dancing across the holographic display. "According to these readings, this creature should be dead." Multiple times over. I was there getting my mandatory health screening. Being a Zolorian means dealing with our notoriously fragile respiratory systems, and I couldn't help but peek at the display. The numbers made no sense. Bone density that would make a Blex 9 warrior weep with envy, muscle fiber composition that defied basic physics, and something called adrenaline that apparently turned humans into temporary berserkers when threatened. Perhaps there was an error in translation. I suggested helpfully. Dr. Hesf's crystalline laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, sweet child. I have run these scans 17 times. This human can survive impacts that would liquefy a Corvan battleship. His reaction time is faster than our best cyber-enhanced soldiers. And apparently, when injured, his body just repairs itself. I squeaked. Regenerative capabilities that put our medical nanobots to shame. Backup organ systems. And look at this." She pointed to a particularly disturbing section of the scan. "His brain releases combat stimulants that would kill any other known species. But for humans, it just makes them fight harder. That should have been warning enough. But the Academy Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided that Marcus Webb was simply an interesting specimen to study. They assigned him to standard courses, gave him a dormitory room next to the Mennarin crystals, and waited to see what would happen. What happened was advanced xenobiology 3rd period Professor Kelmro's lecture hall. I remember that day with the kind of clarity that comes from genuine trauma. The morning started normally enough. If you consider having a potential apex predator asking to borrow writing materials normal. Marcus sat 2 rows ahead of me, politely taking notes while Professor Kelmro droned on about the hunting patterns of vegan sandworms. "The key to understanding predator behavior," Professor Kelmro was saying, "is multiple eye stalks weaving hypnotically, is recognizing that all aggression follows predictable patterns. Even the most dangerous creatures can be anticipated, controlled, and ultimately defeated through superior intellect." Marcus raised his hand. "What about persistence hunting?" Professor Kelmro's eye stalks froze mid-weave. "I beg your pardon, persistence hunting," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying that casual human tone that I now know means absolute catastrophe is about to unfold. "Where you don't try to be faster or stronger than your prey, you just keep following them, for hours, days, sometime, until they collapse from exhaustion." The professor's gill slits fluttered nervously. "That would be inefficient, would it?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, and I swear I saw something predatory flicker behind his eyes. "I mean, if you are built for endurance instead of speed, it makes perfect sense. Why waste energy on a quick strike when you can just outlast anything on the planet?" Uncomfortable silence settled over the lecture hall. Professor Kelmro, to his credit, tried to maintain academic composure. Well, yes, theoretically, such a strategy might work, but no intelligent species would resort to such primitive tactics. Humans do it all the time, Marcus said cheerfully. That's when Bractul decided to make the biggest mistake of his very short life. Bractul was what we called a legacy student. His father was High Commander Brakvor of the Corvan shock troops, and Daddy's money had bought him a place at the academy despite having the intellectual capacity of crystallized methane. He was also built like a tank, standing nearly 3 meters tall with arms that could crush titanium. Are you threatening us, soft skin? Bractul rumbled, rising from his reinforced chair with a sound like grinding metal. Marcus turned around slowly, and I got my first good look at what humans call a smile. It wasn't reassuring. Threatening you? Marcus asked, his voice maintaining that terrifying casual tone. No, I'm just explaining basic predator behavior. Though now that you mention it, he stood up, and suddenly the size difference between him and Bractul didn't seem nearly as significant as it should have. Your species does exhibit some interesting flight responses when cornered. Flight responses. Bractul's throat sac inflated to full threat display, and his claws extended with metallic clicks. I am Corvan. We do not flee from anything. Really? Marcus tilted his head like he was genuinely curious. So when your great-great-grandfather surrendered his entire fleet to 3 human ships at the Battle of Kepler 4042, that was just tactical repositioning. The silence that followed could have been measured in geological epochs. You have to understand, the Battle of Kepler 432 was the Corvan Empire's most shameful military defeat. 3 human vessels, outnumbered 50-1, had somehow convinced an entire Corvan armada to surrender without firing a shot. The official records claimed equipment failure, but there had always been rumors. Bractul's throat sac turned a deep purple that I later learned indicated homicidal rage. You dare insult the honor of my bloodline? I'm not insulting anything, Marcus said, and that terrible smile grew wider. I'm just pointing out that humans have been persistent hunting your species for about 200 years now. We have gotten pretty good at it. That's when Bractul charged. What happened next redefined my understanding of physics, biology, and the fundamental nature of violence itself. Bractul moved like a freight train, all 300 kilos of enhanced muscle and bone hurtling toward Marcus with enough force to punch through a starship hull. His claws extended to full length, razor-sharp implements designed to shred through combat armor. Marcus stepped aside. It sounds simple when I describe it like that. But you have to understand, Marcus didn't just dodge. He moved with the kind of fluid precision that suggested he'd been tracking Bractul's approach vector since before the Corvan had even decided to attack. It was like watching someone casually avoid a meteorite by simply not being where it was going to land. Bractul crashed into the wall behind Marcus with a sound like a small explosion. Chunks of reinforced academic-grade construction material rained down on the lecture hall floor. Interesting, Marcus observed, brushing dust off his shoulder. Your acceleration is impressive, but your trajectory prediction needs work. Bractul peeled himself out of the wall, shook his massive head, and roared. It was the kind of sound that had once sent entire armies fleeing in terror. A bone-deep expression of pure, unadulterated rage that activated every prey instinct in the room. Except Marcus just stood there, head tilted slightly, like he was listening to mildly annoying music. Are you done? He asked politely. Bractul charged again, this time with more tactical awareness. He feinted left, then right, trying to corner Marcus against the professor's desk. His claws swept in calculated arcs designed to herd his prey into an inescapable kill zone. Marcus ducked under the first swipe, stepped over the second, and somehow ended up behind Bractul while the Corvan was still mid-attack. When Bractul spun around, snarling and slashing, Marcus was already somewhere else entirely. You know, Marcus said, conversationally, apparently having a pleasant discussion while systematically dismantling a trained killer. This reminds me of hunting Cape buffalo back home. Big, aggressive, lots of momentum, but not much in the way of strategic thinking. Bractul roared again and launched himself into a spinning attack that should have turned Marcus into component molecules. Instead, Marcus caught him. I'm still not entirely sure how it happened. One moment, Bracktool was a whirling dervish of death and destruction. The next, Marcus had somehow redirected all that momentum, using Bracktool's own weight and speed to slam him face first into the floor with enough force to crack the reinforced academic tiles. "The thing about Cape Buffalo," Marcus continued, as if he hadn't just performed what looked like a minor miracle of applied physics, "is that they are dangerous right up until they are not. Then they are just meat." Bracktool tried to get up. Marcus placed one hand on the back of the Corvan's neck gently, almost casually, and Bracktool suddenly discovered that moving was no longer an option. "Now," Marcus said, his voice taking on what I now recognize as that particularly terrifying human quality called a reasonable authority, "I think we should probably discuss this like civilized beings. What do you say?" Professor Kelmrow, who had been frozen in academic horror throughout this entire display, finally found his voice. "Security. Someone call security." "Sci-Fi will be necessary," Marcus said, maintaining his casual grip on a warrior who could bench press a hover tank. "Bracktool and I are just having a friendly discussion about predator behavior. Aren't we, Bracktool?" The Corvan made a sound that might have been agreement or possibly a request for immediate medical attention. That's when the doors burst open and 47 Corvan shock troopers poured into the lecture hall. I suppose I should have seen it coming. Bracktool was the son of a high commander after all, and Corvan males have this unfortunate tendency to call for backup when their pride gets bruised. What I didn't expect was for Daddy to send what amounted to a small army to deal with one human student. The shock troopers moved with military precision. Advanced plasma rifles trained on Marcus, while their leader, a massive Corvan with enough battle scars to decorate a museum, stepped forward. "Release my son, human." High Commander Brackthar rumbled, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had conquered star systems. "And perhaps your death will be quick." Marcus looked up from where he was still casually restraining Bracktool, and for the first time since this whole thing started, he actually looked surprised. "Really?" he asked. "You brought an entire military unit to resolve a classroom disagreement? That seems excessive." High Commander Brackthor's throat sac inflated to maximum threat display. "You have assaulted a member of the Corvan nobility. The penalty is death." "Assaulted?" Marcus glanced around the lecture hall, taking in the scared faces of his classmates, the shattered wall and the small army pointing weapons at him. "I was defending myself against an unprovoked attack. I'm pretty sure that's legal under Academy regulations." "Academy regulations do not apply to humans," High Commander Brackthor snarled. "You are nothing but primitive savages playing at civilization." And that's when Marcus smiled again. But this time it was different. This wasn't the polite, academic smile he'd worn during his discussion of persistence hunting. This wasn't even the predatory smile he'd shown when Bracktool first challenged him. This was something altogether more dangerous. "Primitive savages," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying a tone that made my survival instinct start screaming. "You know what? You are absolutely right." He released Bracktool, who immediately scrambled away like his tail was on fire. Then Marcus stood up, brushed off his hands, and looked directly at High Commander Brackthor. "I was trying to be civilized," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that made the temperature in the room drop by several degrees. "I was trying to fit in, follow the rules, be a good student. But if you want primitive savages—" He reached down and picked up a broken piece of his chair, just a simple length of polymer and metal. Nothing particularly threatening. "Well," Marcus said, testing the weight of the makeshift weapon in his hand, "I suppose I can work with that." What happened next lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I know because I was staring at the chronometer display on the wall, desperately hoping that someone would wake me up from what was obviously a nightmare. High Commander Brackthor made the first mistake by ordering his troops to take Marcus alive. The second mistake was assuming that 47 trained soldiers with advanced weapons would be sufficient for the task. Marcus moved like liquid death. The first 3 shock troopers went down before they could fire a shot, their plasma rifles spinning away as Marcus flowed between them like he was dancing to music only he could hear. The improvised club in his hands became an extension of his will, striking with surgical precision at joints, pressure points, and weapon systems. "Target his center mass." High Commander Brackthor roared. "Bring him down." But Marcus wasn't where their weapons were pointed. He was behind them, beside them, somehow managing to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Every time a plasma blast scorched the air where he'd been standing, he was already elsewhere, turning their numerical advantage against them. A Corvan warrior swung his rifle like a club. Marcus caught it, used the momentum to throw the soldier into 3 of his comrades, and somehow ended up with the weapon in his hands. Instead of firing it, he dismantled it with 3 quick motions and used the components as projectiles. "He's just one human," Breakfor screamed, his voice cracking with disbelief. "How is this possible?" Marcus paused in his systematic destruction of an elite military unit to glance back at the High Commander.
"You really want to know?"
A plasma bolt meant for Marcus's head instead struck the ceiling, sending chunks of debris raining down on the battlefield that had once been a lecture hall. Marcus caught a piece of falling metal and threw it with enough force to knock 2 more soldiers unconscious. "We spent 10,000 years learning how to kill things that wanted to kill us," Marcus explained conversationally, using his improvised club to disable what appeared to be a squad-level support weapon. "Everything on our planet tried to eat us, poison us, or tear us apart, so we got really, really good at fighting back." Another group of soldiers tried to surround him. Marcus flowed through their formation like water through a sieve, leaving unconscious Corvan in his wake. "The thing about being persistence hunters," Marcus continued, apparently capable of delivering an academic lecture while single-handedly defeating a small army, "is that we don't just outlast our prey, we adapt to them. Learn their patterns, figure out their weaknesses." He spun around a soldier's charge, used the Corvan's own weapon to tangle 3 more warriors, and somehow ended up standing next to High Commander Breakfor. "And you know what your species' biggest weakness is?" Marcus asked, placing the point of his broken chair leg against the High Commander's throat. Breakfor's compound eyes went wide with terror. "What?" Marcus leaned in close, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every nightmare that had ever kept a civilized being awake at night. "You forgot that sometimes the prey fights back." The lecture hall fell silent except for the groaning of unconscious soldiers and the steady drip of coolant from damaged plasma weapons. Marcus stood in the center of what looked like a battlefield, barely breathing hard, while 47 of the Corvan Empire's finest warriors lay scattered around him like broken toys. High Commander Breakfor stared at the human with the kind of expression usually reserved for natural disasters or divine interventions. "Impossible," he whispered. Marcus shrugged and tossed the broken chair leg aside. "You guys really need to update your intelligence files. This isn't even close to our best work." That's when the Academy security forces finally arrived, followed immediately by representatives from the Galactic Council, the Interspecies Military Tribunal, and what appeared to be every major news organization in the sector. Marcus Webb had just redefined interspecies relations with a piece of broken furniture and 4 minutes of controlled violence. And the worst part, he was just getting started. The news feeds went insane within minutes. "Human student defeats entire Corvan battalion with classroom furniture," screamed the Galactic News Network. "Primitive Deathworlder humiliates elite military unit," proclaimed the Altarian Times. The Mentaren Crystal Collective, in their typical understated fashion, simply reported, "Statistical impossibility observed at Academy." I was still sitting in that devastated lecture hall, watching Marcus Webb calmly answer questions from a very nervous Galactic Council investigator, when my personal communicator started buzzing with messages from every friend, family member, and random acquaintance I'd ever had. "Zilthka, are you alive? Did you really see a human kill 47 soldiers? Is it true they are evacuating the Academy?" That last one turned out to be accurate. Within 2 hours of what the media had dubbed the Webb incident, Academy administrators were frantically trying to relocate every non-human student to secure facilities. The official reason was routine safety protocols. The real reason was that everyone had suddenly realized they were sharing dormitories with a species that could apparently turn furniture into weapons of mass destruction. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed genuinely confused by all the fuss. "I didn't kill anyone," he pointed out to Investigator Helmrell, a 4-armed Blex 9 with the kind of professional demeanor that came from dealing with interstellar war crimes. "They are all just unconscious. Maybe a few broken bones, but nothing that won't heal." Helmral's secondary arms were busy taking notes while his primary hands gestured at the scattered Corvan soldiers. Mr. Webb, you disabled 47 trained warriors in less than 5 minutes using improvised weapons. 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Marcus corrected helpfully. And technically it was just one improvised weapon, the chair leg. Everything else was just momentum redistribution. Momentum redistribution, Helmral repeated, his voice carrying the tone of someone trying to process information that didn't fit into any known category. Basic physics, Marcus shrugged. You use their weight and speed against them. Redirect their energy. Find the pressure points. Exploit their training patterns. Most military units drill the same responses over and over, which makes them predictable. Dr. HFY, who had been quietly scanning the unconscious soldiers, looked up from her medical readings with the expression of someone who'd just discovered that mathematics was optional. Mr. Webb, she said carefully, according to my instruments, you struck each of these warriors with surgical precision. You avoided major organs, bypassed vital systems, and somehow managed to render them unconscious without causing permanent damage. That level of anatomical knowledge would require years of study. Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. I just paid attention during your xenobiology lectures. The silence that followed could have been heard from orbit. My lectures? Dr. HFY's crystalline voice cracked slightly. You learned Corvan anatomy from my introductory course? Well, that and the military briefings, Marcus admitted. You'd be surprised how much biological data gets included in standard Earth Defense Force intelligence reports. And that's when Investigator Helmral dropped his note-taking stylus. Earth Defense Force, he asked, his voice rising to something approaching panic. You are military, former military, Marcus corrected. I mustered out 6 months ago. Thought I'd try civilian education for a change of pace. High Commander Braxvor, who had been standing in sullen silence while medics tended to his unconscious troops, suddenly looked like someone had explained why his entire unit was napping on the floor. What was your rank? He demanded. Marcus hesitated for just a moment, the first sign of uncertainty I'd seen from him all day. That's classified. Classified. Investigator Helmral's forearms began moving in what I recognized as the Blex 9 equivalent of extreme agitation. Mr. Webb, I need to know exactly who we are dealing with here. A student, Marcus said firmly. I'm just a student who wants to learn xenobiology and maybe figure out why everyone in the galaxy thinks humans are dangerous. Dr. HFY laughed. That crystal-breaking sound again, but this time it carried a note of hysteria. You want to know why everyone thinks humans are dangerous? You just defeated an elite military unit with a piece of furniture. To be fair, Marcus said thoughtfully, they started it. That's when my communicator buzzed with an emergency alert that made my blood freeze in my veins. The message was brief, direct, and absolutely terrifying. Priority alert. Corvan, High Fleet moving to Academy Sector. Estimated arrival 6 hours. Prepare for military intervention. I wasn't the only one who received it. Every personal device in the room began chiming, buzzing, and flashing with urgent notifications. Investigator Helmral's professional composure finally cracked as he read the incoming data. Sweet stars and void, he whispered. They are bringing the entire 3rd battle group. How many ships is that? Marcus asked, and there was something in his tone that made everyone in the room pay very close attention. 47 dreadnoughts, High Commander Braxvor said, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he looked pleased. Plus support vessels, fighter squadrons, and enough firepower to sterilize a planet. All for one primitive human. Marcus nodded slowly, like he was processing tactical data. And they will be here in 6 hours. Less than that now, Helmral confirmed, his 4 hands dancing across his communication array. Mr. Webb, I strongly suggest you surrender yourself to Academy custody. Perhaps we can negotiate. No. The word cut through the room like a blade. Marcus wasn't shouting, wasn't angry, wasn't even particularly emotional. But something in that single syllable made every survival instinct I possessed start screaming. No? Investigator Helmral repeated weakly. Marcus stood up, brushed debris off his academy uniform, and looked around the devastated lecture hall with the air of someone making important decisions. I came here to learn, he said quietly. I wanted to understand other species, maybe help with diplomatic relations. I thought if I could show that humans weren't the monsters everyone believed us to be. He trailed off, shaking his head. But you know what? Maybe everyone's right. Dr. HFY's crystalline form began to vibrate with what I now know was pure terror. Mr. Webb, please, whatever you are thinking. I'm thinking, Marcus interrupted, that bringing 47 warships to deal with one student is either incredible overkill or a perfectly reasonable response. And the fact that I can't tell which one it is probably says everything about human-alien relations that needs to be said. He walked over to where his personal belongings had been scattered during the fight and began collecting them with methodical precision. His movements were calm, efficient, and somehow more threatening than any of the violence that had come before. Where are you going? High Commander Brackford demanded. Marcus paused in his packing and gave the Corvan officer a look that should have come with a hazard warning. I'm going to call home. Home, Helm Rau's voice cracked. Mr. Webb, please tell me you are not planning to contact Earth Military Command. Oh no, Marcus said, and that terrible smile was back. I'm calling my sister. The blood drained from every face in the room that was capable of changing color. Those without that particular biological function found other ways to express existential dread. Your sister, Dr. HFY whispered. Sarah Webb, Marcus said cheerfully, pulling out a communication device that looked suspiciously advanced for civilian hardware. Admiral Sarah Webb, commander of Earth's 7th Fleet. She's been looking for an excuse to visit this sector for months. High Commander Brackford made a sound that might have been intended as laughter but came out more like the death rattle of a broken air filtration system. You expect us to believe that one human fleet could threaten the Corvan Empire? Marcus paused in his dialing and looked at the High Commander with genuine curiosity. Have you actually read any recent intelligence reports about human military capabilities? We know everything we need to know about your primitive weapons, Brackford snarled. Really? Marcus tilted his head. So you know about the dimensional fold generators, the quantum torpedo systems, the fact that human ships can apparently appear inside enemy formations without using conventional FTL drives. The silence that followed was deafening. Oh, Marcus continued conversationally. And there's the whole thing where human crews can operate in conditions that would kill most other species. Radiation levels that liquefy Corvan biological systems, G-forces that turn Altarians into paste, battlefield scenarios that drive Mentoran crystals permanently insane. He finished dialing and held the communication device to his ear. But I'm sure your intelligence files are completely up to date. The device connected, and suddenly the room was filled with a voice that managed to sound both warm and absolutely terrifying at the same time. Marcus, how's school going? Please tell me you haven't accidentally started another interspecies incident. Marcus looked around the destroyed lecture hall, the unconscious soldiers, and the gathering crowd of panicking officials. Well, about that, oh, for crying out loud. Admiral Webb's voice carried easily across the room and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. What did they do this time? Brought 47 warships to arrest me for defending myself in a classroom disagreement. The pause that followed was filled with the kind of silence that usually precedes natural disasters. They brought how many ships? Admiral Webb's voice had taken on a tone that made the ambient temperature drop several degrees. 47 dreadnoughts, plus support vessels. Marcus reported with military precision. Corvan 3rd Battle Group. Estimated arrival in 5 hours, 36 minutes. Marcus, honey, Admiral Webb said. And somehow her voice had become even more terrifying while maintaining that sisterly affection. Did these people not get the memo about the Treaty of Alpha Centauri? What memo? Marcus asked. Though from his expression he already knew the answer. The one that specifically states that any military action against human civilians constitutes an act of war against the Terran Federation. The one that every major galactic power signed after the vegan incident. High Commander Brackford's throat sac had deflated to approximately the size of a grape. The vegan incident. Oh, you don't know about that. Admiral Webb's voice carried the kind of pleasant interest that usually preceded orbital bombardments. Fascinating. I would have thought it was required reading in Corvan military academies. Marcus caught my eye and actually winked. Sarah, you might want to explain the vegan incident to our friends here. I think there's been a communication breakdown. Of course there has. Admiral Webb sighed. There always is. Marcus, put me on speaker so everyone can hear this properly. Marcus adjusted his device, and suddenly Admiral Webb's voice filled the entire lecture hall with crystal clarity. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Admiral Sarah Webb, commanding officer of Earth's 7th Fleet, and apparently big sister to the young man you have all been trying to kill. I'm currently about 12 hours out from your position with a full battle group, so we have time to discuss this situation like civilized beings. Investigator Helm Rao found his voice first. Admiral Webb, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. Oh, I understand perfectly. Admiral Webb interrupted. My little brother enrolled in your academy to study xenobiology and promote interspecies cooperation. Instead, you have subjected him to racial prejudice, physical assault, and now military intervention. How am I doing so far? Your brother disabled 47 trained soldiers. High Commander Brackfor protested, after they attempted to execute him for defending himself. Admiral Webb replied smoothly. I have been monitoring Academy communications since Marcus enrolled. I know exactly what happened in that lecture hall. The blood drained from Dr. HFY's crystalline form. You have been monitoring our communications. Standard procedure. When human citizens are operating in potentially hostile environments, Admiral Webb explained cheerfully. We learned that lesson during the Altarian trade negotiations. You remember those, don't you? When 3 human diplomats mysteriously disappeared and were later found being used as experimental subjects. Another uncomfortable silence filled the room. Now, Admiral Webb continued. Let's discuss the current situation. High Commander Brex Ver, you have mobilized a battle fleet to capture or kill a human civilian. Under the Treaty of Alpha Centauri, that constitutes an act of war. He's not a civilian, Brackfor protested. He's military trained. Former military, Admiral Webb corrected. Honorably discharged and pursuing civilian education. The distinction is important, legally speaking. Marcus cleared his throat. Sarah, maybe you should tell them about the automated response protocols. Oh yes. Thank you for reminding me, Admiral Webb said, and I swear I could hear her smiling. You see, when humans detect military action against our civilians, certain safeguards activate automatically. What kind of safeguards? Investigator Helm Rao asked, though he sounded like he really didn't want to know the answer. Well, for starters, every human military installation within 50 light-years has been placed on high alert. The 2nd, 4th, and 9th fleets have been mobilized and are currently moving toward your position, and our automated defense platforms have begun charging their primary weapons systems. The lecture hall had become so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my chest. How many ships is that exactly? Dr. Hestvoy whispered. Oh, roughly 237 capital vessels, plus escorts, support craft, and about 40,000 fighter drones. Admiral Webb replied casually, though that number might increase depending on how long this situation takes to resolve. High Commander Braxvor made a choking sound. 237 ships? For one human? High Commander, Admiral Webb said, and her voice carried the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow child. Marcus isn't just any human, he's a Webb. Our family has been defending human interests for 6 generations. We take attacks on our relatives very seriously. Very seriously, Marcus agreed. And there was something in his expression that made me remember exactly how easily he'd dismantled an elite military unit. So here's what's going to happen, Admiral Webb continued. High Commander Brax-4 is going to order his fleet to stand down and return to Corvan space. The Academy is going to issue a formal apology for the unprovoked assault on a human student, and everyone involved in this incident is going to attend a mandatory seminar on interspecies relations and conflict resolution. And if we refuse? Brackvor asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Admiral Webb's laugh was like music played on instruments designed for warfare. High Commander, I really hope you don't refuse. The last time someone declared war on humanity, we accidentally conquered half their star system while trying to negotiate a ceasefire. Marcus nodded solemnly. The Regalian Republic still hasn't recovered. That was an accident? Dr. HFY asked weakly. Complete accident, Admiral Webb confirmed. We were aiming for their military installations and somehow ended up liberating 43 colony worlds that didn't even know they were oppressed. It was very embarrassing for everyone involved. That's when my personal communicator buzzed again with another priority alert. This one was even more terrifying than the first. Emergency update: human fleet signatures detected on long-range sensors. Count U uncertain. Estimated arrival 11 hours. Investigator Helm Rao read the message and made a sound like air leaking from a punctured hull. Admiral Webb, our sensors are detecting a lot of ships. Oh, those would be the advanced scouts, Admiral Webb said helpfully. The main fleet is still a few hours behind them. Don't worry. They are just here to observe and provide tactical support if necessary. How many scouts? Marcus asked. And I got the distinct impression that he was enjoying this conversation far more than anyone else in the room. Just a light reconnaissance force. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and about 8,000 fighter drones. Nothing too intimidating. High Commander Brexit Ford's throat sac had now deflated completely, giving him the appearance of a very large, very frightened deflated balloon. 8,000 fighter drones? The drones are the really impressive part, Marcus explained, conversationally. Each one has the combat capability of a small warship, but they are controlled by artificial intelligence systems that can process tactical data faster than most organic brains can even perceive it. Marcus, Admiral Webb's voice carried a note of fond exasperation. You are scaring them. Sorry, Sarah. I'm still adjusting to civilian life. It's fine, dear. Just remember, we are trying to promote peaceful interspecies relations. Marcus looked around the devastated lecture hall, the unconscious soldiers, and the gathering crowd of terrified officials. Right, peaceful relations. That's when the Academy's emergency broadcast system activated, filling the air with the voice of Director Kelmoth, the ancient Altarian philosopher, who ran the institution. Attention all students and faculty. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the Academy is implementing immediate evacuation protocols. All non-essential personnel are to report to emergency transport stations within the next 4 hours. This is not a drill. Admiral Webb's voice carried a note of genuine concern. Marcus, are they evacuating the Academy? Looks like it, Marcus replied, watching through the lecture hall windows as emergency vehicles began landing on the Academy grounds. I guess having me as a student is bad for enrollment. Oh, sweetheart, Admiral Webb said, and for the first time her voice carried genuine sadness instead of barely controlled violence. I'm so sorry. I know how much this opportunity meant to you. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching his fellow students hurry past the windows with their belongings clutched in panicked hands. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room pay attention. Sarah? Yes, dear? I think it's time we had that conversation about human nature that I have been avoiding. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the distant sounds of evacuation seemed to fade away. Are you sure? Admiral Webb asked softly. Marcus looked around the room one more time, taking in the faces of beings who had gone from dismissing him as a primitive savage to fearing him as an apex predator in the space of a single afternoon. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm sure. They need to understand what they are really dealing with. And that's when I realized that everything we'd seen so far, the casual dismantling of an elite military unit, the terrifying family connections, the automated fleet responses, had just been the warm-up act. The real show was about to begin. Admiral Webb's voice took on a tone I'd never heard before, something between a military briefing and a funeral oration. Marcus, are you absolutely certain? Once we tell them, there's no going back. Marcus looked around the room one final time, his gaze settling on each of us in turn. When those human eyes met mine, I felt something primal and ancient recoil in terror. They brought warships to kill a student. Sarah. They need to know. All right then. Admiral Webb's sigh carried the weight of inevitability. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sapient beings, let me tell you about human behavioral psychology. High Commander Brack-4 straightened slightly, apparently thinking this would be some kind of academic lecture, What does psychology have to do with military capability? Everything, Marcus said quietly. Because the thing about humans is that we don't just fight to win, we fight to make sure the fight never happens again. Admiral Webb's voice filled the room with the kind of authority that commanded star systems. Most species engage in conflict as a means to an end. Territory, resources, dominance. Humans are different. For us, conflict isn't about winning, it's about teaching. Dr. HFY's crystalline form began vibrating at a frequency that suggested extreme agitation. Teaching what? Teaching other species not to threaten humans, Marcus replied. And something in his voice made the temperature in the room drop several degrees. The problem is, we are really good teachers. That's when my communicator erupted with another priority alert, this one so urgent that the device actually started smoking. Critical update. Human fleet composition exceeds previous estimates. Current count 400 pulses and rising. Tactical analysis suggests full battle formation. Investigator Helmral's forearms began shaking as he read the message. 400 ships. Admiral Webb. Our initial reports indicated roughly 200 vessels. Oh, those were just the official fleet assets. Admiral Webb said casually, we forgot to mention the volunteer vessels. Volunteer vessels. Dr. HFY whispered. Marcus smiled, that terrible smile again. When humans hear that one of their own is being threatened by alien military action, well, people tend to take it personally. How personally? High Commander Brackfor asked. Though his deflated throat sac suggested he really didn't want to know. Well, Admiral Webb mused, we have got merchant vessels retrofitted with military hardware, private exploration ships armed with mining lasers, 3 separate mercenary companies that were in the area, and at least 50 civilian craft that apparently decided this looked like an interesting weekend activity. Civilian craft, Helmral repeated weakly, with military weapons. Welcome to human culture, Marcus said cheerfully. The line between civilian and military gets a bit blurry when someone threatens the pack. Pack? I found myself asking, though every instinct I possessed was screaming at me to stay quiet. Marcus turned those predator eyes on me, and for a moment I felt like a small animal being evaluated by something very large and very hungry. That's the part they really need to understand, isn't it, Sarah? I was hoping to avoid this conversation, Admiral Webb admitted. But yes, I suppose they do. Marcus walked over to the lecture hall's main display screen and activated it with casual familiarity. Images began appearing, star charts, fleet movements, and what looked like historical battle data. Most species think of humans as individuals, he began. And suddenly I was listening to a lecture that was infinitely more terrifying than anything Professor Kelm-Rowe had ever taught. That's a dangerous misconception. Humans are pack hunters, always have been, always will be. The display showed footage from what appeared to be historical human conflicts, massive space battles, coordinated fleet movements, and tactical maneuvers that defied conventional military wisdom. When you threaten one human, Marcus continued, his voice taking on that terrible professorial tone, you are not just threatening an individual. You are threatening the pack. And packs respond differently than individuals. How differently? Dr. HFY asked, though she sounded like she was regretting the question. Admiral Webb answered from the communicator. When the Altarian Trade Confederation kidnapped those 3 human diplomats, they thought they were dealing with a minor incident involving expendable personnel. What they got was a 6-month campaign that resulted in the complete restructuring of their government and the liberation of 47 slave worlds. We tried to negotiate, Marcus added helpfully. They kept insisting the diplomats had died in an accident. So we had to prove them wrong. Prove them wrong. Helmral's voice cracked. The display shifted to show what appeared to be a massive rescue operation. Hundreds of ships converging on a single star system. Surgical strikes that dismantled planetary defenses without causing civilian casualties. And precision operations that extracted 3 humans from the heart of enemy territory. The diplomats were being held in a research facility, Marcus explained, his tone remaining conversational despite the horrific implications. Underground installation, maximum security, supposedly impregnable. It took us about 4 hours to get them out. 4 hours to penetrate maximum security? High Commander Brack 4 asked. Oh no, Admiral Webb corrected. 4 hours for the entire operation. Penetrating their security took about 15 minutes. The other 3 hours and 45 minutes were spent documenting their illegal experiments and gathering evidence for the War Crimes Tribunal. I stared at the tactical displays, trying to process what I was seeing. The human rescue operation hadn't just been efficient, it had been surgical, precise, and apparently conducted with the kind of coordination that suggested weeks of planning completed in a matter of hours. How is that possible? I whispered. Marcus looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Because when humans go to war, we don't just fight with ships and weapons, we fight with everything. Every civilian becomes a scout. Every merchant vessel becomes a supply line. Every human in the galaxy becomes part of the war effort. The display shifted again, showing communication networks that spanned hundreds of star systems, supply lines that operated with impossible efficiency, and coordination patterns that looked more like a hive mind than individual military units. What you are seeing, Admiral Webb explained, is what happens when a persistence-hunting species develops faster than light communication and industrial manufacturing capabilities. We don't just coordinate locally, we coordinate species-wide. That's impossible, Investigator Helmrell protested. No species can maintain that level of coordination across interstellar distances. Most species can't, Marcus agreed. But most species didn't evolve from pack hunters who spent 100,000 years learning to coordinate complex group hunts across vast territories. That's when the Academy's emergency systems activated again, but this time the voice belonged to Director Kelmoth himself, and he sounded absolutely terrified. All personnel, please be advised that long-range sensors have detected massive fleet movements in Academy space. Current estimates suggest over 600 vessels of unknown configuration. Evacuation efforts are being accelerated. 600. Dr. HFY's crystalline form was now vibrating so rapidly that she was becoming translucent. How many humans are coming here? That's actually a really good question, Admiral Webb admitted. Marcus, can you check the volunteer registry? Marcus tapped something on his personal device. Waited a moment. Then made a sound that might have been laughter or possibly a threat display. Sure, you are going to love this. How bad is it? Well, the good news is that it's not just military volunteers anymore. We have got scientific vessels, exploration ships, merchant fleets, 3 different mining consortiums, and what appears to be an entire civilian evacuation convoy that got redirected when they heard about the situation. And the bad news? Marcus grinned, and I finally understood why every species in the galaxy had developed an instinctive fear of human facial expressions. The bad news is that Granddad heard about what happened. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear my own circulatory system pumping hemolymph through my body. Marcus, Admiral Webb said very carefully, please tell me you are joking. Fleet Admiral James Webb, Terran Federation Navy, retired, is currently en route with what his message describes as a few old friends who wanted to meet the young man's classmates. High Commander Brackvor made a choking sound. Fleet Admiral? How many humans hold that rank? 3, Marcus replied cheerfully. My grandfather, my great-aunt Helen, and the Secretary of Defense. And before you ask, yes, they are all related, and yes, they are all coming here. Your great-aunt Helen? Dr. HFY whispered. Admiral Helen Webb, commander of the Terran Federation's First Fleet and winner of the Battle of Wolf 359. Marcus explained with obvious family pride. She's the one who developed the doctrine of overwhelming response to threats against human civilians. The displays around the room suddenly lit up with new data. Massive fleet formations moving through space with the kind of coordination that suggested they'd been practicing these maneuvers for decades. Ship after ship appeared on the sensors, each one broadcasting human identification codes and moving in formations that looked less like military units and more like migrating swarms. How many ships is that now? Helmrell asked, though he sounded like he was afraid of the answer. Marcus consulted his device again. Well, let's see. Official military assets, volunteer vessels, civilian craft, and now the extended family response. I'd estimate somewhere around 1,200 ships and counting. 1,200 ships, High Commander Braxva repeated. his voice carrying the tone of someone watching their entire worldview collapse in real time. For one student. For one human, Admiral Webb corrected from the communicator. And that's the point you are missing, High Commander. This isn't about Marcus specifically. This is about what happens when you threaten any human anywhere in the galaxy. But why, I found myself asking, even though speaking up was probably the stupidest thing I could possibly do. Why do you respond like this? What's the evolutionary advantage of such excessive retaliation? Marcus looked at me with something that might have been respect. That's actually a very intelligent question. The answer is simple. It works. The main display shifted to show historical data spanning centuries of human expansion across the galaxy. Conflict after conflict, each one resulting in overwhelming human victory despite seemingly impossible odds. When humans first left Earth, Marcus began, we were weak, primitive, and completely outmatched by every other species we encountered. So we developed a simple strategy: make the cost of threatening humans so catastrophically high that it becomes easier to leave us alone. Deterrence through disproportionate response, Admiral Webb added. If attacking one human brings down the entire species on your head, most rational beings decide that attacking humans isn't worth the risk. Most rational beings, High Commander Breck-4 said bitterly. The Corvan Empire has always prided itself on being the exception to galactic norms, Marcus observed. Unfortunately, that makes you excellent test subjects for human military doctrine. That's when the real horror began. The Academy's sensor displays, which had been tracking the approaching human fleets, suddenly lit up with new contacts. Hundreds of them, appearing seemingly from nowhere and moving in coordinated formations that suggested they'd been waiting in the outer system for hours. What are those? Dr. Hesvig asked. Marcus glanced at the displays with casual interest. Oh, those would be the advanced reconnaissance units. They have been monitoring the situation since about an hour after it started. Monitoring from where? Investigator Helmrau demanded. Stealth positions throughout the system, Admiral Webb explained helpfully. Standard procedure, when human civilians are operating in potentially hostile environments. We like to keep eyes on the situation. I stared at the sensor displays, watching as ship after ship decloaked from positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. They'd been there the entire time, watching, waiting, ready to respond to any threat against one of their own. How long have they been there? I whispered. Since Marcus enrolled at the Academy, Admiral Webb replied. We have been tracking every ship movement, monitoring every communication and maintaining tactical readiness since day one. High Commander Breck-4's throat sac had deflated so completely that he looked like a deflated balloon animal. You have been spying on us for months? Not spying, Marcus corrected. Babysitting. There's a difference. What difference? Marcus's smile became something that should have come with a hazard warning. Spies gather information. Babysitters make sure nothing bad happens to what they are protecting. And if something bad does happen, he gestured toward the sensor displays, where more than 1,000 human vessels were now visible, moving in formations that looked less like military units and more like the movements of a single incredibly dangerous organism. Well, Marcus continued, babysitters tend to take it personally. That's when High Commander Breck-4's personal communicator activated with an emergency signal. The voice that emerged belonged to Admiral Kilvex, Supreme Commander of the Corvan 3rd Battle Group. High Commander, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Breck-4 asked, though he sounded like he already knew the answer would be catastrophic. We are outnumbered approximately 30-1. Our intelligence files on human military capabilities appear to be completely inaccurate, and we are receiving surrender offers from what appears to be a human child. Marcus brightened considerably. Oh, that would be my cousin Jenny. She's 12 years old and captain of her school's tactical simulation team. They must be running communications for one of the escort squadrons. A 12-year-old human, Admiral Kilvax's voice carried through the communicator with the tone of someone whose grip on reality was slipping, is offering to accept our surrender. Jenny's very advanced for her age, Marcus said proudly. Last year she won the All-Sol Youth Military Strategy competition by successfully defending Earth against a simulated invasion by 6 different alien species simultaneously. It was a simulation, Dr. Hesvy said weakly. Everything's a simulation until it isn't. Admiral Webb observed. And Jenny's simulations have been remarkably accurate predictors of real-world tactical scenarios. High Commander Brack Vor activated his communicator with shaking hands. Admiral Kellevax, what are your tactical recommendations? The pause that followed lasted long enough for me to seriously consider the possibility that the Admiral had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. High Commander, Admiral Kellevax finally replied. My tactical recommendation is immediate and unconditional surrender, followed by requesting asylum from the Galactic Council, followed by mandatory psychological counseling for everyone involved in this operation. Surrender? Braximvor's voice cracked. To humans? High Commander, I am looking at sensor readings that suggest the human fleet could sterilize our entire home system without breaking formation. Their smallest escort vessels appear to carry more firepower than our primary battle cruisers, and they are moving in coordination patterns that our computers are classifying as tactically impossible. Marcus nodded approvingly. Jenny always was good at fleet coordination. The 12-year-old is coordinating a 1,000-ship battle fleet. Investigator Helm Rowell asked. Oh no, Admiral Webb corrected. Jenny's just handling communications for her squadron. Fleet coordination is being managed by the tactical AI systems. Artificial intelligence. Dr. Hess's crystalline form was now vibrating so rapidly that she was barely visible. Limited AI, Marcus clarified. We don't do full artificial consciousness. That would be unethical. But our tactical systems can process battlefield data and coordinate responses faster than organic minds can even perceive the situation. The main display shifted to show what appeared to be a real-time tactical analysis of the entire star system. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, maintaining formations that maximized firepower while minimizing vulnerability and responding to changing conditions with the kind of precision that suggested superhuman intelligence. This is impossible, High Commander Brackfor whispered. No species can coordinate this many vessels with this level of precision. Most species can't, Admiral Webb agreed. But humans didn't become apex predators by accepting limitations. We became apex predators by figuring out how to overcome them. That's when Marcus walked over to his personal belongings and pulled out what appeared to be a small, innocuous device. What is that? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect that asking questions was a really bad idea. Emergency beacon, Marcus replied casually. Every human carries one. If activated, it broadcasts a priority distress signal to every human military installation within 1,000 light-years. Dr. Hess V's made a sound like crystalline wind chimes in a hurricane. You haven't activated it yet? Marcus looked around the room at the unconscious soldiers, the terrified officials, the sensor displays showing massive fleet movements, and shook his head. No, he said quietly. Because activating it would mean I was actually in danger. And despite everything that's happened here today, I don't think anyone has actually tried to kill me. Yet, Admiral Webb added ominously. Yet, Marcus agreed. But if someone does, he held up the beacon, and even though it was a simple device, no larger than his thumb, it somehow managed to look like the most dangerous object in the room. Well, let's just say that 1,200 ships would be the opening act, not the main event. High Commander Brax Vors stared at the beacon with the expression of someone watching his own execution being prepared. How many ships would respond to an active distress signal? Marcus consulted his personal device. According to current fleet dispositions and automated response protocols, approximately 8,000 vessels, plus support craft, orbital installations, and whatever civilian assets happen to be in the area. 8,000 ships, Investigator Helm Rowell repeated numbly. Give or take, Admiral Webb confirmed. Though that number would probably increase once word got around. Humans tend to take threats against their own very personally. I found myself staring at Marcus Webb, this quiet, polite student who had asked to borrow a pen just this morning, and finally understanding exactly what we were dealing with. He wasn't just a human. He was a member of a species that had turned coordinated violence into an art form, that treated interstellar warfare as a family activity, and that could summon overwhelming force from across the galaxy with the press of a button. And he was still trying to be reasonable about it. High Commander, Admiral Webb's voice carried the tone of someone offering a final opportunity for sanity. I strongly suggest you order your fleet to stand down and return to Corvin space. My family has gone to considerable trouble to arrange this demonstration of human capabilities, but we'd prefer not to turn it into a shooting war. Breakfor looked around the room one final time, taking in the unconscious soldiers, the terrified officials, and the student who had single-handedly triggered the largest military response in galactic history. Admiral Kelvax, he said into his communicator, his voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. Order all ships to stand down and return to Corvin space immediately. Thank you, Admiral Webb said warmly. Marcus dear, please thank your classmates for their patience during this educational demonstration. Marcus looked around the room and smiled. Not the predatory expression that had been terrifying us all day, but something warm and genuinely friendly. Thank you all for helping me understand why humans have such a reputation in the galaxy, he said sincerely. I was really confused about that when I first arrived. Dr. HFY's crystalline form had finally stopped vibrating, though she still looked like she was in shock. You were confused about why people fear humans. Well, yeah, Marcus said, apparently genuinely puzzled. I mean, we are really not that dangerous? We just want to get along with everyone? I stared at him. This human who had dismantled a military unit with furniture, summoned a 1,000-ship fleet with a phone call and threatened to call down 8,000 more vessels if anyone actually tried to hurt him, and realized that from his perspective he was telling the absolute truth. Humans weren't dangerous because they were aggressive or violent. They were dangerous because they genuinely wanted to get along with everyone and they were willing to reshape the galaxy by force if necessary to make that happen. As the human fleets began their coordinated withdrawal and the Academy started the slow process of returning to normal operations, I made a mental note to transfer to a different xenobiology program, preferably one that didn't involve studying species that considered interstellar warfare a minor family disagreement. But as I watched Marcus Webb pack up his belongings and prepare to return to his dormitory like nothing unusual had happened, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, having humans in the galaxy wasn't such a bad thing after all, as long as you remembered to treat them politely and never ever threaten their families. Because if today had taught me anything, it was that humans didn't just fight to win, they fought to make sure you never forgot the lesson. And they were very, very good teachers.